The last time I made a video about module sowing versus direct sowing was about 4 years ago, so I thought it's about time to do an updated one. And then I felt, actually, let's just focus on direct sowing, because I feel like it's quite underrated in this day and age. It's a little bit of an underdog. There's a lot of module sowing, and obviously there are huge benefits of module sowing, but I kind of want to give a little bit of a boost to sowing directly, because there's some undeniable benefits that it brings gardeners. The first benefit is that if you are gardening and you don't have much time, perhaps just the weekends or something, then sowing directly is much faster than, say, sowing in modules and then keeping them watered and then transplanting as well. There's quite a few steps there, because if you think about sowing a module tray, you've got to fill it with compost to begin with, you've then got to make the holes, etc. Whereas when you're direct sowing, effectively you make a trench, you put the seeds in, cover it over, give it water, and that's about it. There's a lot less care and attention needed. And another good thing about that is that by sowing directly, it reduces the compost needs of your garden, because all of these seedlings here, I've had to use a lot of compost to start them off. Now, I could have used smaller cells, for example. However, I don't need to use any compost whatsoever if I'm just sowing the seeds directly. So it's a really great way to save money. Now, you might not have a polytunnel, which means if you're wanting to start off seedlings, you might only have some windowsill space, and you want to prioritize that for the really important crops, for example tomatoes, which means if you're starting off all these modules, where can you put them all? Whereas if you're sowing directly, you don't need that really precious space to try and store and grow on the seedlings in modules or trays. Instead, you're planting them exactly where they're going to be growing. And so if you are struggling for space to raise seedlings, direct sowing removes that worry or that struggle from the equation. If you think about it, sowing directly is nature's way of how plants grow. There is no kind of germinating, creating a seedling and then transplanting it somewhere else. That doesn't happen in nature. Instead, you might have, say, a bird dropping a seed, or you might have, say, a squirrel hiding an acorn. And so sowing directly, like we have for these field beans here, which started off as a cover crop, but I'm just going to grow them to eat all of the pods, is a perfect example, because you're using nature's way of growing. And you've got to think about it. Surely in the DNA of every seed or every crop that we grow is the DNA of, if I'm put in the soil, I want to grow and not really be moved or transplanted. So if you're keen about being close to nature, then direct sowing is certainly a step closer than transplanting. What I found is that sowing directly creates a more resilient seedling sooner, because when you put a seed in the ground, here there's some mustard greens that we're growing, and we put cloves in for the garlic that's starting to grow. They effectively have unlimited space in which their roots to grow, and they have a tendency to try and spread out their roots far and wide, not just to get nutrients, but also to make sure that they get water, and it also makes them more stable as well. They have a more stable footing. Direct planting broad beans is always going to create a stronger plant than, say, transplanting a broad bean seedling. And so when you're sowing in modules, what happens is that the roots are restricted to the size and the amount of compost within the module. And so if you got the exact same crop and you compared sowing it directly and sowing it in modules, and you inspect the roots of both, you'll find that the direct sown one is going to have roots that expand and reach out much further than the module one. And this automatically will create a more resilient plant. If there's drought-like conditions, it has more access to water, for example. After last year, I really value that. One of my favourite reasons to sow directly is when you put the seeds in the ground, they germinate when they want to. For example, the rocket over there has managed to overwinter. We've got all those flowers to enjoy. But if you're, say, planting something in the ground now, it might not come up for a month or two, and you think, oh no, it's a dud seed. But being in the soil, being outside, it seems to kind of just know when the right time to appear is. Now, I actually made a video last year, which you can watch right here, about 9 crops you never need to buy seed for again. So you can grow them this year because they prolifically self-seed so much. It's just a case of just relocating them. So give that a watch and save yourself a lot of money and have a lot of fun.